in ecotourism, in good agricultural practices, in green building standards, in water stewardship. And if they can create within those rural communities green buildings that need less energy, energy supplies that come entirely from renewable sources, ecotourism that connects to the high quality of the environment around, those areas have been extremely poor in recent years, but they do have the capacity for resilience that some mountain areas don't have, and they're very, very keen to rebuild that and connect it to sustainable development. I've also done a bit of work in the Ukraine, in the Carpathians there. Low incomes are the norm. Incomes that make Greek incomes, even in these troubled times, look remarkably healthy. I met forest workers who were earning $50 a month, and yet who were living well because they were highly dependent on their own produce, their own processing, their own access to forest and game. They used wood fuel. And they actually lived in what I would call sustainable austerity. Much, much better than people who were caught in industrial towns in the transition in that country. There are ecotourism possibilities, but you've got a challenge and you've got a paradox that almost anything that increases income will increase the ecological footprint. So how do we develop those areas sustainably? And I think the kind of ideas that WWF are pushing have got certainly elements of what needs building upon. Let's go back to that diagram that I started with. In our Accueil Paysan model, food, home and work all sit together. Transport and leisure impacts are much reduced, so they're shrunk, and the energy block declines as well. We've got a household multiplier where we can add value to our own produce. We've got connectivity with local economies, which enriches the local multiplier there. And we've reduced the carbon and ecological footprints very substantially. Those are the kind of ways that I think we need to move forward. So some quick conclusions. We live in a time of great turbulence and volatility, economically and politically. We have to build greater resilience. We will experience shocks. There could be food crises. The world is a troubled place that we live in today. But we must reduce our ecological footprint. In spite of the growth that is occurring in Asia, we have to do that globally, but we cannot not act ourselves. We must act ourselves. Much of this can come from within and be a product of vibrant rural communities. Of course, the European Union and national governments and municipalities have to help set the scene. And community vibrancy isn't guaranteed. And breaking out of a vicious cycle of decline is not always easy. But by designing effective rural development programs and using supportive policy instruments, we have to do this if we're going to move forward. And those well-designed rural development programs will be an important building block. And within that sits LEADER, of course, and an increasing approach, I think, in the European Union to innovation, which we must look at. Not innovation in a high-tech sense, but innovation in a regrounding and a rethinking of how we live and how we move forward towards sustainable development. We have to use these policies to reflect on and build towards adaptation, towards resilience and sustainability. Thank you very much indeed.
Ευχαριστούμε πολύ και για τα παραδείγματα, τις καλές πρακτικές, αλλά και τις ιδέες. Κρατάμε ότι πρέπει να σχεδιάσουμε για το μέλλον, αλλά λαμβάνοντας υπόψη τη σοφία και του παρελθόντος, των παππούδων και των γιαγιάδων. Ο Στέφανος Λουκόπουλος θα μας μιλήσει για ένα ενδιαφέρον θέμα, ειδικά για την Ελλάδα, το θέμα των leader. Είναι κάτι το οποίο συζητάμε πολύ εδώ στο Ευρωπαϊκό Κοινοβούλιο. Η έννοια τοπικά κατευθυνόμενη βιώσιμη ανάπτυξη. Στέφανε, ο λόγος.
Καταρχήν θα ήθελα να ευχαριστήσω πάρα πολύ τον κύριο Χρυσόγελο για την πρόσκληση. Είναι χαρά μου που βρίσκομαι μαζί σας σήμερα. Θα σας απογοητεύσω λόγω ότι θα μιλήσω στα αγγλικά. Θα κάνω την παρουσίαση μου στα αγγλικά. I am Stefanos Loukopoulos. I'm the coordinator of the European Leader Association for Rural Development. We are basically an association representing more than 850 local action groups throughout 22 different member states of the EU. And our role is to promote the leader method, promote the bottom-up approach, stimulate partnerships, cooperation, and hopefully influence to whatever extent we can EU policy towards a more sustainable future for our rural areas. So as Mr. Χρυσόγελος mentioned, I'm going to give you a presentation which will analyze the leader method. We're going to go through it together, see how it has been implemented in the current programming period. We're going to spend a couple of minutes talking about how it's being implemented in Greece. I'm going to provide you with a couple of best practice projects from Greece. And then the last part of my presentation will focus on the next programming period. And this is where I believe the interesting part lies. So bear with me, and I'm sure we're going to do it right. So first of all, for those of you that are not familiar with the leader method, you need to bear in mind that it's part of the European Agricultural Fund for Rural Development. It's the second pillar of the CAP. And within the EFRD, we have basically three main objectives, which are supposed to be reached through the implementation of three thematic axes. So we have the first thematic axis, which has to do with improving the competitiveness of the agricultural and forestry sector. The second one is about improving the environment, focusing especially on land management. And then the third one is improving the quality of life in the rural areas through the encouragement of diversification. Now, leader comes in as, well, within the EFRT there is another option, it's not an option actually. You have to, like a further requirement is that some of the funding must support projects based on the leader method. This is what the architecture of the current programming period looks like. So you have the three axes: competitiveness, environment, economic diversification, and you've got a fourth axis, which is horizontal, and it's the leader axis. So basically what the leader does is that it offers the possibility through a community-led local development strategy building on local needs and strengths to combine the three objectives in the axis that we just saw before. So it's about an integrated approach that involves basically all the actors, the rural actors. It could be farmers, foresters, and so on. And the horizontal priorities covered with leader are basically the improvement of local governments, and the mobilization of endogenous development potential for the rural areas. Now, the main concept of leader and what makes it stand out is this. First of all, it takes into consideration that rural areas are diverse, and that the development strategies for these rural areas are more effective and efficient if, first of all, they are decided and implemented at the local level by local actors, if it's accompanied by clear and transparent procedures, which is not always the case in practice, but we'll go into that, if they have the support of the relevant public administrations, and obviously the necessary technical assistance for the transfer of good practice. So, in a nutshell, the difference between LEADER and other more traditional rural policy measures is that it indicates how to proceed rather than what needs to be done. And this is very important. This is what makes it stand out. These are the 7 key features of the LEADER method. Without one of them, the LEADER method wouldn't exist. We wouldn't be able to apply it. First of all, we have the bottom-up approach, which means that it's the local action group that formulates the strategy for the development of the given area. We have integrated and multi-sectoral actions. We've got innovation, cooperation, networking, and as I mentioned earlier on, the area-based local development strategies. So these 7 components make LEADER what it is today. The local action group is a central tool in the LEADER implementation. It's the engine that puts it in motion, basically. The local action group is a public-private partnership. 50% of it is constituted by the public sector, and the other 50% by representatives of civil society, farmers, rural women, young people, and so on. And what the local action group basically does is it designs the local development strategy of the specific area, and it's responsible for the implementation of the strategy through the promotion of various projects. This is, I'm not going to go through it, it just demonstrates what's the composition of the local action group. Now, that was a brief introduction of LEADER, for those of you that were not aware of it. Now I've had for you some facts and figures concerning the current programming period. I think it's interesting to see this. So, the total amount foreseen for the current programming period at EU27 level for the European Agricultural Rural Development Fund was 9.3 billion euros. Now, what was spent was 1.74 billion. Obviously, the statistics from this are quite they go up to 2011. So let's say that about 20%, 23% have been spent so far. The total number of local action groups in Europe, in the EU27, is 2,303. And more or less, I mean, this was again from statistics coming from 2012, the end of 2012, 54,818 LEADER projects have been implemented EU-wide. It's also important to know that local action groups cover up to 51% of the EU's population, 51%, yeah. And it is said that more than 131 million people will or have benefited from activities undertaken by the local action groups. This is a map that I borrowed from the European Commission, the Agri, put it online. It basically demonstrates the area coverage of the local action groups in Europe. As you can see, the more color there is in the country, it means that the more it is covered by local action groups. And you will see that Greece is not, it's not ideal, let's say, the number of the amount of coverage. It's not the worst, but it's not ideal. Which brings me to some figures on LEADER in Greece. To be honest with you, I had a few difficulties getting hold of these statistics. This is something that we'll have to work out with the local authorities over there. But anyway, what we know is that the total number of local action groups in Greece is 43. The population coverage is 38.5%. The LEADER projects implemented so far, and this is staggeringly low, 506, and this is again from 2012 statistics, so it could be slightly better. And usually the type of beneficiary comes from the private sector. Actually, more than usually, almost 100%. This is a programmed EFRD expenditure, which was 270 million euros. And the actual expenditure, what was realized, what was spent, was 18 million euros. The program public expenditure was 290 million, and what has been realized was 22 million euros. So you can see from these figures that Leader in Greece could be doing much, much better, and I believe it's much needed. I've got here a couple of examples of Leader projects in Greece. This one is a typical example of a small-scale project in a small island. It took place in Limnos. And it basically has to do with the establishment of refrigeration facilities and small horticultural packaging units. So it's about a small farmer who runs a family business, and he basically decided to further his project, his investment, by establishing this refrigeration facility and by constructing a small horticultural packaging unit. So basically what resulted from this was that the business activities expanded, and this was apparently an innovative action for the area. It facilitated the provision of high quality, high image horticultural products towards the local and also national market. And also in response to the high health and awareness of, in response to the high awareness of food health and food safety issues, the investment will incorporate quality standards to guarantee health and safety. As I said earlier on, this project took place in Limnos Island. The total project cost was 366,696 euros. The leader contribution was 238,353, and the private contribution was about 130. Another example of a leader project that took place in Greece. The project is titled Equestrian Naturalist Center. The beneficiary was a private person, and basically this project aimed at the creation of a horse and riding center in order to contribute obviously to rural tourism and the development, the wider development of the area. Well, I'm not going to go through all of this, but basically this person received necessary funding in order to set up his business in terms of from buying the horses to establishing and creating the landscape, etc. The result of this project obviously was to increase the potential of rural tourism in this area, and of course it offered a few jobs. This project took place in Karditsa, in Thessaly. The total project cost was 252,000 euros, out of which Leader contributed 125, 126 more or less, and private contribution was 126,000. So these are two small examples. Again, I was looking for more examples in specifically in mountainous areas, but the information made available to us was not what we expected. Now I'm going to pass to the second stage of this presentation, after giving you an idea of what has happened in the current programming period in terms of leader. I'm going to give you a taste of what's in stock for the next programming period. So, I think the following buzzwords, I believe, are essential in order to describe the outcome of the next programming period. Mainly, we should keep in mind the term CSF, the Common Strategic Framework, which is, I'll go into further on that. It's basically a coordination tool of structural funds. The multi-fund approach is a buzzword as well, and of course community-led local development. Now, overall, as of next year, the bottom-up approach, which I would say that was pioneered by LEADER, will be basically mainstream, and it will be accompanied with tools facilitating the implementation of multi-funded or multi-sectoral integrated local development strategies. What you can see behind me on the screens is the architecture of the next programming period. You have to keep in mind that the Europe 2020 strategy is central for most all of the activities of in terms of funding. You have in the second line you have the common strategic framework, which is it's meant to reflect the EU 2020 strategy through common thematic objectives. And then you have the partnership contract. The partnership contract is very important. It's basically an agreement between the member state and the European Union, which defines which funds are going to be used in the pursuit of the EU 2020 objectives. And then, in terms of the rural development policy per se, instead of the 4 axes, we'll have 6 priorities. We have fostering knowledge, transfer and innovation in agriculture, forest and rural areas. We have the enhancing competitiveness of all types of agriculture and farm viability, promoting food chain organization and risk management in agriculture, restoring, preserving and enhancing ecosystems dependent on agriculture and forestry.